Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to AVX Live. I'm Joe Gilderson, President of Corporate Audio Visual Services. Today's a new day. It's episode 101. We have a slightly new intro, slightly different format. So let's get this thing started. Just a reminder for everyone, you can find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube every Wednesday, 1 p.m. While you're there, make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons because you got to follow Corporate AV. Who doesn't want to do that? While watching the show, look, drop us a comment, be a part of it, right? I'm going to try to answer anything live, just like always, and maybe with a little bit of commentary to go back and forth too. But listen, let's get this thing started. Last week, we had a conversation with our lead audio visual engineer, Maurice Johnson. Maurice is, an icon around here, and we're continuing to celebrate his 25th anniversary working here at Corporate Audio Visual, and of course, his very recent, January 5th to be exact, Maurice Johnson Day in Westchester County, which was super cool. If you get a chance, take a look at last week's video. We have a whole clip in there, and Maurice's family was there. Is really a great experience. We got to hear about how things have changed, since he first started, and some of the things that he does that are really important to all of his clients. The second part of last week's show was we got to watch a bunch of different AVX bloopers over the course of the first 100 shows. Really, for the most part, it's just Ryan getting another opportunity to make fun of me like he did the first time when these things happened. So that's really all it was. But all good stuff. Hopefully if you get a chance, go back and watch that. But for today's show, it's kind of driven by about a month ago, I was fortunate enough to be a part of a panel for ADO, which is Association of Development Officers. And this was the Westchester chapter. While in that panel, it was with some great people. My friend Bobby D, live auctioneer. We had Shannon Cataro with Westchester Mental Health, and of course my friend Allison Curtis with Make-A-Wish Hudson Valley. And they had some really great tips. But what I wanted to go through is I noticed we did surveys afterwards, and I saw some of the things that really were hitting home for the 100 or so nonprofit organizations that were there. And this is usually a big planning time for all of the spring galas. So I thought this would be a perfect time to just recap some of those quick tips. So we have 3 tips specifically for nonprofits about planning their events. So I'm going to bring in a few graphics here. Let's see what we got. All right. So 3 tips. Tip number 1, and this came up really in the very beginning of that panel. Book your audiovisual production partner early. Now, why? Well, there's a lot of reasons why. But let's look at the very first one. We happen to work in hundreds of venues all around the tri-state area. And then even further, because of all of our travel work, up and down the East Coast and north to Boston, Hartford, Rhode Island. But in the immediate vicinity, we're very familiar with almost all of the venues. So whether that's a hotel or it's a catering hall, or it's some other sort of special event, or even a conference center. Like we worked in a conference center last night, where we add on to kind of what they have in place. Just knowing what's in place is helpful. But remember, not every space is going to be perfect for the type of event you're holding. So if you have someone that's a partner, in your corner, you should utilize their knowledge and resources. So I think that's the first thing, is that we can probably help you with the space that you're looking to book. Because we want to get you on that right track, really, to go from the very beginning. You don't want to be, 6 months into planning an event and realize they don't have internet there, and you have an all-day conference that is 100% reliant on internet, or that they're just not going to have enough electrical power to host a large-scale event that you might want to do. So all these things are, kind of in our wheelhouse and our knowledge base. So utilize the team. Of course, budgets got to be established right in the beginning. And, that this question comes up a lot. But in general, AV and lighting and production are one of the top 3 expenses. You usually have the venue, you have food, and you have the audiovisual production. And it can very easily be the biggest expense. So these are things you have to take into consideration. So better to know these things up front. The other piece to that when you're trying to budget early is we can probably help guide you, in a certain direction based on what the most important things are that you're trying to accomplish. And if we can gather that information in the beginning, we can kind of steer that direction and say, you know what, you'd probably be better off using that budget for something else. Or, you know what, you absolutely need to apply it to this. Maybe it's a video recording or it's something else. But these are the tips that you're going to get from a production partner. So be sure to utilize those resources. Other little guidelines, if we're producing videos, lead time is usually about 3 months. We need to line up staffing, we need to get dates on the books. All those things are usually 2 months out. So these are all kind of helpful ideas, and why bringing on a partner such as an audiovisual production partner is usually better in the beginning, because you're no longer a vendor at that point, but you are actually a partner. So just some quick tips. That's tip number one. Let's look at tip number two. Okay, you got to think about your dates and times. Many in the nonprofit community are holding their events around the same dates and usually at the same times. But let's talk about the dates first, right? The spring, where there's a lot of spring fundraisers, spring's about 13 weeks, 14 weeks in the Northeast. The fall, when you have those big black tie events, well, that's more about 8 weeks. And it always depends on school vacations, certain holidays and how they fall in the month. There's graduations. All these things are factors. And really, a lot of our nonprofit clients are competing with other nonprofit clients as well. So you have to get those dates in early. But look at what's going on around you. There are various online calendars, other groups. Just be aware. And I think that will help you in your planning. Quick tip too, as for a nonprofit, because that's what we're talking about specifically today, Monday through Thursday, they're usually less expensive than Friday and Saturday. The key though is you got to end earlier, right? Because most of the people who are your key donors or key sponsors and supporters, they have to work the next morning and they got to get up early, and they're not going to hang out too much later than 9 o'clock. So anything that's really important programming wise, that should be wrapped up by 9. If you want to extend the after the desserts and after program drinks and everything until 10 or 9:30 or whatever, I think that's fine. But everything of importance really needs to be wrapped up by 9. Now, when you're talking about Fridays and Saturdays, that's a little different, right? Because people are now planning that as a night out. So I think you have to go big when you're doing a Friday and Saturday night. So that means there's going to be entertainment. It might be a longer event. I think people look at it differently when it's Friday and Saturday night. The event goes later, of course. Now it's an 11 o'clock night, not a 9 o'clock night. But these are all factors. The other thing with Fridays and Saturdays, of course, if you're going to catering halls and places that are similar to that, is that you're now competing with these social events. So there's a lot of weddings that are going to happen on Friday night, Saturday night. So just be aware of these things. And this is part of what you're trying to plan for. And this is why it's a tip for you, because this is a budgeting tip as well. Last point in this area, when we're talking about dates and times, you got to stay on time. Staying on time is critical. You can't be 45 minutes late on your program. People are going to leave, and they're going to leave during the part where you don't want them to leave. More on that in a minute. But let's use this as just kind of a guide. Okay. So Monday through Thursday, usually less expensive, but you have to end earlier. Friday and Saturday, people are expecting to have a good time. So you have to have some added entertainment value there. And then I think you always have to stay on time. I think that's critical for any program. Let's look at tip number 3. And I think this plays into, staying on time as well. Keep the main thing the main thing. What does that mean? That means that they are there, all of those people there are there to support the group and support the organization. And they're not there for what color the tablecloth is, right? They're there to support the organization or support one of their friends that's maybe being honored, or to support the organization that's a sponsor. But that's a pretty captive audience for all of our nonprofits. And I think they should look at everyone in that room as a potential donor or supporter or volunteer. But the first way to do that is you have to be very clear about why they're there. So tell the story. Tell them why they're there. Tell them what you're doing. Tell them how you're doing it. Tell them where the money's going to go that you're trying to raise. But tell the story, because not everybody knows it. Second point is you got to make it easy for them to give money. So whether it's a call to action, however you're going to do your call to action, whether it's live auction, silent auction, paddle raise, it doesn't really matter. You just have to make it easy for them. It can't be overly complicated. And it should happen, really right in the beginning of the program, right? Tell the story, show the videos, build up all the momentum of here's the time now that you can help us. And here's the call to action. And that's where, a lot of our friends like the auctioneers are really good at that portion. But there's a lot of ways you can make that happen. And the third little tip is some of the most successful nonprofit fundraising events we've seen, the honorees are usually towards the end of the program. Now, why is that? Just think that one person brought in, 6 tables, and they were the first honoree. And then those 6 tables left before the call to action. That would be pretty unfortunate. You don't want that. So let's do the call to action, tell your story, do the call to action, then do the honorees, so that all those people that are potentially there supporting their friends and family and organization, that they stay and are part of it and now learn more about your organization so they can contribute in the future. Keep those honorees towards the end. I think those are really my big tips for everyone. I wanted to try to keep this program short and right to the point. And that's what we're going to try to do. Next week we'll do something different. We're probably going to have another guest back in. But while it's just me, nobody wants to hear me talk that much. So we want to go through this pretty quick and just have some helpful advice. So that's all I'm going to do for you guys today. Just again, next time, just check us out every Wednesday, 1 p.m. That's on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube. After this event, you'll be able to see some short video recaps on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And if you really want to dig in and get into it, go to our YouTube channel. You can see all 101 episodes. And, maybe we'll learn something. Maybe you won't. I can't say. Let's see how much you watch. But listen, thank you, everyone. We appreciate all of your time, and we're looking forward to seeing you next week. Bye-bye. Ciao, ciao.